After 17 years, Lu Yu finally devoured the soul of the heavenly emperor and re-examined the world. Since the reopening of heaven and earth, spiritual energy has reappeared, and all living beings take immortality as their way of life, seizing their qi and giving birth. Gathering true qi can open mountains and gravel, traveling thousands of miles a day. Practicing magic can summon the wind and rain, and soar through the clouds and mist. Tigers howl in the mountains and forests, dragons swim in shallow waters. In this life, conquer the sky, tigers descend the mountain, dragons fly in the 9 heavens. Keywords of the novel. Peerless Dao Jun No Pop-Ups, Peerless Dao Jun TXT Complete Collection Download, Peerless Dao Jun Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Worship, Martial God Kneels. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Worship, Martial God Kneels 12 Years of Great Success, Spring. To the east of Lianghua Dragon Capital, the Temple of Martial Arts. The Crown Prince led countless nobles and nobles in the Dragon Capital to worship here. De Liang established the country through martial arts, and the whole country worshipped the god of martial arts. The spring and winter festivals were held without interruption. Little Marquis, don't be stunned, kneel down quickly. A burst of anxious urging sound awakened Lu Yu from his ancient slumber. Lu Yu opened his eyes and looked around. He saw himself in a deep blue sky, with a towering statue of the martial god standing in front of him like a giant. Where is this? Lu Yu finally spoke hesitantly. This was an instinctive inquiry, but it unexpectedly caused a lot of noise and laughter. The fool of the Marquis's mansion in Yongping is indeed famous for his foolishness, not even knowing where he is. It is rumored that this fool Lu Yu, who is 5 years old, doesn't even know how to write his own name. It took him 3 years to finally master a set of ordinary and unremarkable long fists, which can be considered a peerless rotting wood. If he weren't the only son of Marquis Yongping, he would probably have starved to death on the streets long ago. If his father hadn't used his powerful skills to elevate him to the next level, he probably wouldn't even be able to enter the martial arts temple. Disdainful gaze fell on Lu Yu, and mockery filled his ears one after another. As for the official next to Lu Yu, he was already in a hurry and stomped his feet, constantly persuading him to kneel down quickly and not miss the hour. Lu Yu turned a deaf ear to all of this. 17 years have passed. I, the Lord of the Underworld, have finally completely devoured the soul of the Heavenly Emperor. Shenling Long, you never imagined it. You joined forces with hundreds of Dao Jun to attack me. Not only did I not die with the Heavenly Emperor, but I also swallowed him and came back to life. Lu Yu looked at the azure sky he had never seen before, with a hint of brilliance in his eyes. Lu Yu, you are now at the martial god altar. I apologize for your lack of intelligence. I'll spare you this time. Don't make any fuss, kneel down and worship quickly. The Crown Prince shouted loudly. Lu Yu looked up at the Crown Prince and found that he was emitting a golden light all over his body. Except for the Crown Prince, several young aristocratic children present all had such a similar golden light appearing. The golden light seemed to exude a sense of pressure, casting awe upon those around it. Lu Yu, don't look. This is a divine light that only young and handsome talents who receive the attention of the martial god can obtain, which is very beneficial for the path of the martial art. If you are envious, hurry up and worship the martial god to see if he can open his eyes and bestow a divine light on you. Someone sneered. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's gaze towards Lu Yu became even more mocking. No one believes that the fools of the Lu family will receive the attention of the martial god. As for the young people present, there are over 100 people under the age of 30, but fewer than 10 have received divine light. Those who can obtain divine light are all young talents with unlimited prospects. The Crown Prince did not sneer, but his gaze also flashed with a hint of disgust and disdain. He waved his hand and said, Lu Yu, go quickly to offer incense and worship, don't delay the time. No need. Lu Yu glanced at the Crown Prince, turned around, and prepared to leave. What? Worshipping the god of martial arts is an opportunity that no one else can even ask for. You don't want it. The crown prince immediately stopped in front of Lu Yu and said in a deep voice, Lu Yu, worshipping the martial god is the top priority of my Liang family. Are you going to cause trouble? Lu Yu also looked at the crown prince with a calm gaze and said, no, it's because there's no need to worship. Why? Because of martial god, I can't afford to kneel like this. This statement caused an uproar. Vertical Sun, what nonsense are you talking about? A warrior shouted fiercely. A bunch of nonsense, truly ignorant of the vastness of heaven and earth. How did Marquis Yongping teach his son that when the Holy One returns, we will definitely go to this court to impeach him? The several great scholars were so angry that their beards trembled and they flew into a rage. At this moment, someone suddenly sneered and said, it's not because he's afraid of losing his father's face. He's afraid to go. His father, Marquis Yongping, was a genius who obtained the martial god Divine Light at the age of 10. If he had a son who couldn't even obtain the Divine Light at the age of 17, it would really be embarrassing. Lu Yu sighed helplessly and said, it's just a wild god who hasn't been granted the title of a deity by the Imperial edict. How could you really be worshipped as a deity? However, Lu Yu immediately shook his head and said, even if it's a true martial god, I've killed more than one. It's natural for me to worship him. For Lu Yu's words, everyone unanimously believed that they were just crazy words from a fool. The crown prince's face turned pale as he looked at Lu Yu and said, this is the fragrance of your Yongping Marquis' mansion. You are the only male servant in Yongping Marquis' mansion in Longjing now. If you don't worship, you will lose your Yongping Marquis' mansion's face. When your father comes back, I'll see how he explains it to the court and the public. How could such a thing happen again? Lu Yu frowned and remained silent for a long time, saying, it's okay to worship him, but it's impossible for me to kneel down. The crown prince's face also changed, but he only wanted this fool to finish the worship and not miss the time. So the crown prince chose to remain silent. Lu Yu took the incense from the official's hand and lit it with fire. Later, Lu Yu walked up to the statue of the god of war and bowed before it, but inserted the incense into the bronze cauldron. A refreshing breeze blew up a wisp of green smoke, making Lu Yu's figure somewhat blurry. In front of the tall statue, Lu Yu appeared incredibly small. There is no change. Some of the originally anticipated and curious gazes also dimmed. That's right, how can a person who can only achieve glory and wealth through the achievements of their parents gain the attention of the martial god? Someone sneered repeatedly. Amidst countless mocking gazes, Lu Yu turned around and left. Just as Lu Yu took his first step, a loud noise suddenly came from behind. Boom! A heart-wrenching roar resounds through heaven and earth. The sky suddenly burst into golden light, but that golden light far surpassed the miraculous light, shaking people's heads and eyes dizzy. What is that? Is it divine light? It's impossible. How could divine light be such a sound? Before anyone could recover, Lu Yu took the second step. There was another loud noise, and then the ground began to tremble wildly. Thick cracks began to spread from the altar and eventually spread to the entire ground. The sky was clear for thousands of miles, suddenly turning into dark clouds. A gust of wind blew through the dark clouds, and several thick thunderbolts suddenly burst out. Like a raging dragon roaring, countless huge thunder struck the martial god fiercely. Boom! 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 The statue of Wu Shen, symbolizing the virtue of the great Liang dynasty, was struck by thunder and lightning from the sky. The sturdy and undamaged statue of the martial god, cast entirely of black iron, surprisingly had countless cracks. The originally clear sky with thousands of miles suddenly produced countless thunderbolts, as if recognizing the statue of the martial god, and smashed it hard. In the process of a cup of tea, the statue of the martial god is already on the verge of collapse. The legs and knees of the martial god statue were bent down by the thunderbolt, and in the blink of an eye, the bronze statue knelt down straight. Smoke and dust rose everywhere, and everyone's faces turned pale. Thunder punishment. This is thunder punishment. Is it fate? It's impossible. Our country is in full swing, how could it have caused such a scene? While everyone was in great fear, someone noticed that the position of Lu Yu was right in front of the statue of the martial god kneeling down. Can you say? It was done by Lu Yu. Martial god statue, kneeling down to Lu Yu. It must be the officials of the Ministry of Works who cast the bronze statue who were greedy for money and created a cut corners bronze statue, fooling me into waiting for so many years. After returning, we must impeach those workers' bugs. Everyone doesn't believe that Lu Yu is the initiator of all this, just a fool. How can we make Wu Shen kneel in front of him? Impossible. This is simply a fantasy, absolutely impossible. But the scene before me, when viewed from a distance, was as if the bronze statue of the martial god was kneeling down for Lu Yu, shocking. Looking at the chaotic martial god altar, Lu Yu pushed away the crowd and walked out with his feet raised. Lu Yu, where are you going? The crown prince shouted loudly. Lu Yu turned his head and replied in a calm tone, I haven't returned for 17 years. I want to go home and see my family. Everyone was taken aback, then burst into laughter, and the initial suspicion naturally dissipated. It was indeed a coincidence. Look, a fool or a fool. How old are you this year? Only 17 years old. It's still 17 years since you returned. Didn't you just come out of the Yongping Marquis's mansion this morning? I guess I didn't receive the divine light of the martial god and didn't have the face to continue standing here, so I'll hide and go home, someone said confidently. Everyone responded in unison, expressing not only disdain for Lu Yu, but also a complaint against the group of beetles in the Ministry of Works for their greed for payment and for creating a cut corners bronze statue. Only the crown prince looked at Lan Diu's back, with a hint of doubt in his eyes. However, this doubt, accompanied by the surrounding noise, quickly disappeared without a trace. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Emperor's Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Emperor's Marriage. On Longjing Zhuke Street, a carriage raced past. This carriage is 6 feet wide and about 8 feet high, made entirely of iron and wood, and is impervious to knives and guns. The 2 horses pulling the cart are the unique fiery horses of the north. When running, they are surrounded by flames and can travel thousands of miles per day. This carriage is exclusive to the Yongping Marquis's mansion, and the flame horse is only produced in the north. This carriage was also personally crafted by the craftsmen of the Ministry of Works. Lu Yu sat in this carriage, memories flooding into his mind like a tide. In his previous life, he was the Lord of the Underworld, in charge of the 18 realms of the Underworld. With a single sword in hand, it sweeps across the heavens and all realms, unmatched by anyone, making it the strongest Taoist ruler. But when he challenged the ruler of the heavenly Emperor Taiqian, he was ambushed by the Taoist couple Shen Linglong and hundreds of Taoist lords. Together with the heavenly Emperor Taiqian, he died and his soul fell into the lower realm. Shen Linglong, you are so passionate that you truly cultivate the pure green of the underground stove fire. You were cut off from your meridians and your elixir field was destroyed. It was only after using all the spirit stones on my body that I obtained a vitality pill to help you practice again. Your spiritual roots are poor and your talent is insufficient. It was I who ran to Kunlun Divine Mountain and offended countless supreme powerhouses that snatched Kuntianmu to gather your spiritual roots and make you a genius in the heavenly zone. You crossed the crisis of calamity, life and death are at stake. The world only knows that you, Shen Linglong, cut off the sky thunder with just one finger, but I don't know that all the endless sky thunder has been carried down by me. How could there be such a ruthless person like you in the world? You coveted my immortal weapon and, while I was challenging the heavenly emperor, launched a surprise attack from behind, killing me. It's worth killing. It's worth killing. In Lu Yu's heart, there seemed to be a long dragon roaring. At the fingertips, a sharp aura pierced through the sturdy iron plate, emitting wisps of green smoke. As if responding to the anger in Lu Yu's heart, a thunderbolt suddenly sounded in the clear sky. Yu Yu! Yu Yu! The driver's urgent call came from outside the carriage, causing it to jolt and then stop. Young master, damn it! I don't know why this horse suddenly went crazy today. The coachman whispered through the carriage. Lu Yu whispered, it's okay, keep moving. The carriage continued to move, and Lu Yu's heart gradually calmed down. Despite being ambushed by Lengshuang, Lu Yu did not lose his soul, but instead fell into the lower realm with the soul of the heavenly emperor Taiqian. Lengshuang, together with 30 powerful Taoists, laid a killing array that almost shook heaven and earth, tore apart space, and cut off all vitality. But both of them are peerless powerhouses, and surprisingly, they have survived in such a killing formation. Coincidentally, the two fell into the lower realm and surprisingly fell into the same body. A child who died young at birth suddenly had two peerless powerhouses surging into his body. From birth to the present, Lu Yu remained introverted and engaged in a fierce battle with the heavenly emperor Taiqian on the spiritual platform, ultimately devouring the remaining soul of the heavenly emperor and regaining his physical body. The heavenly emperor is too dry, truly deserving of being the ruler of the human race. Thinking of his old rival, Lu Yu couldn't help but sigh. From Taiqian's remaining soul, Lu Yu had already seen various memories of him. In an endless universe, countless stars stretch across it. At every moment, there are countless creatures on the stars, including mortals, warriors, beasts, and demons. And the dynasty that governs this universe is called Dayu. And Taiqian is the master of the Dayu heavenly dynasty, revered as the heavenly emperor. In sporadic memories, Lu Yu could see countless powerful Taoists bowing down to pay homage to Taiqian. If he had not met Lu Yu, he would still dominate the entire human race and be worshipped devoutly by countless people. Unfortunately, you met me. Lu Yu's face was indifferent, and with a flick of his finger, a faint golden flame appeared on his fingertips. Compared to the dazzling golden light emanating from the geniuses in front of the martial god altar, the golden light emitted by this flame appears much dimmer. But the two cannot be compared on the same day. This is the true fire of the heavenly emperor's origin, with a breath remaining and his divine soul remaining. However, the soul of the heavenly emperor was engulfed by Lu Yu at this moment, and all of his abilities were taken away by Lu Yu. This is a good thing. With this source of true fire, even if I encounter Lengshuang's killing formation again, I can still go out. Lu Yu took away the true fire of the origin at his fingertips. The place where the true fire of the origin had touched had now dissolved into a gap, emitting wisps of green smoke. Yongping Marquis' mansion is located on the 12 horizontal streets to the west of Longjing. The homestead covers an extremely wide area, with over 1,000 acres, and exquisite gardens are hidden within it. As the Marquis of Daliang, the Yongping Marquis' mansion also has a guard army of 500 people, all of whom are elite soldiers selected from the Northern Army. Longjing was too big, and Lu Yu's carriage had been traveling for almost half an hour before returning to the Yongping Marquis' mansion. Most of the people living on 12 horizontal streets are homes of kings and marquises, so it is very lively here on weekdays. I haven't been spending enough time with my family in this lifetime. In Lu Yu's memory, due to his closed mind, he only consumed a little soul to maintain a normal life. So in the eyes of outsiders, he is a foolish person. Lu Yu is naturally dull and not good at speaking. I can read at the age of 5, and it took me a full month to write my name. At the age of 7, he practiced martial arts and it took 3 years for him to rough his fur with an ordinary long fist. Even when communicating with others, Lu Yu stuttered and couldn't finish a whole sentence fluently. In these 17 years, due to dealing with the remnants of Taiqian, I was unable to release too many divine souls and spiritual intelligence, and was treated as a fool by people. My father was once a god of martial arts, but he was mocked for having a useless son. According to his achievements, he was enough to be promoted to duke, granted the title of a prosperous land in the Central Plains, and enjoyed his later years. However, my father, for the sake of my prosperity, guarded the border for several years and never returned home. My mother has a gentle personality. Whenever I gather in Longjing, those noblewomen always talk to me and mock my mother. My mother has never mentioned it at home, but she has also suffered too much injustice over the years. Sister, in order to inherit her family business, wore armor and went to battle at the age of 15 to kill enemies. She didn't get married even at the age of Huaxin. My family has put in too much effort for him. The only legitimate son in the family, surprisingly wants the whole family to protect him. Recalling his experiences over the years, Lu Yu's fists gradually clenched. In his previous life, Lu Yu had no family. I have been killing since birth, and only by stepping over countless corpses can I become a strong Taoist. In this life, even without truly controlling his body, he experienced the care and warmth of his family. If there were no family to take care of him, even if he had devoured too dry a soul, this body would probably have starved to death long ago. Frozen to death. Yongping Marquis' Mansion, Gate. Lu Yu got off the carriage and saw several carriages parked in front of the Yongping Marquis' mansion. These carriages are adorned with exquisite boxes and adorned with coiled dragon flags. The person looking at the car is also dressed in brocade with a knife, and it looks like they have a good background. Young master, you're back. The old butler stood at the door, his tone seeming somewhat anxious. Lu Yu noticed something was wrong and asked, Uncle Zhong, whose carriage is at the door. The old butler quickly whispered, Young master, hurry to the backyard, but don't go to the main hall. Lu Yu frowned and asked in a deep voice, What's going on? The old butler was taken aback. His young master had never reacted like this. Speak up. Lu Yu shouted loudly. The old butler's forehead was covered in beads of sweat, and his voice trembled as he said, It's from the palace. It said that the emperor married the young lady. Lu Yu frowned and realized that such a thing had happened. Glancing at those imperial guards, it seemed that they were all people from the palace. Lu Yu said coldly, Who will the emperor marry my elder sister to? The old butler trembled and said, It's the king of Wei. Lu Yu's face turned cold and he rushed straight into the mansion. The old butler's face changed greatly and he quickly followed behind, Young master, don't be impulsive. Yongping Marquis' Mansion, Main Hall. At that moment, Lady Euro, the mother of Lu Yu, knelt on the ground and raised her head with an incredulous expression in her eyes. In front of Madame Euro, there stood several eunuchs, the first of whom was a red-clothed eunuch, holding a sacred edict in his hand and looking at Madame Euro with high solemnity. Madam, take the order, said the eunuch in a sharp voice. Madame Euro hesitated for a moment, then picked up the imperial edict with both hands and stood up anxiously, asking, Several gentlemen, isn't the emperor on a war expedition? Why did he suddenly marry him? Several eunuchs met and waved the dust in their hands, looking at Lady Euro without speaking. Mrs. Euro frowned slightly and quickly called the maid beside her to give each eunuch a gold ingot. The eunuchs collected the money, and then their faces softened a bit. The eunuch in red, Pai Xiaoro, said without a smile, This year's hunting in the suburbs of Beijing, Lingyuan Lu Lengshuang has the most prey and won the first place. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wei, admires her so much that he wrote a letter and sent it to His Majesty, who has traveled thousands of miles that day. Today, His Majesty replied with a decree that he arrived in Longjing. After marrying into the royal family, this Yongping Marquis' mansion will become a relative of the imperial family. Congratulations, madam. Mrs. Euro's face was pale, she didn't expect such a thing to happen. Lu Lengshuang is already 20.4 years old this year, at the age of discussing marriage. Mrs. Euro naturally took extra care of herself, but she never expected that it would be a marriage bestowed by the emperor. She never expected that the object of the emperor's marriage would be the current king of Wei. If it were an outsider, it would be fine, but the king of Wei must not let him marry his own daughter. If this king of Wei is a beast, it's all cheap for him. Fourth Prince Yang Yishan was appointed as the king of Wei at the age of 3 and went out to build a palace. At the age of 10, he brutally killed the maid who took care of him, and scattered her on the steps to be trampled on. At the age of 12, she snatched a civilian girl on the street, tied a rope around her neck, and dragged her all the way with a carriage until blood flowed into a river and she was completely unrecognizable before stopping. At the age of 15, he established a wine pond and meat forest in his own royal mansion, forcibly robbed a good family, and spent his days seeking pleasure in the palace. All the women who were robbed have little chance of coming out alive. Even if alive, the outcome will be unbearable. Mrs. Euro trembled all over. She would never allow her daughter to marry such a scoundrel. This father-in-law, Schwanger, has a military background and is far less considerate than ordinary women. If she were to marry His Royal Highness the King of Wei, it would be inappropriate. Moreover, she also holds the position of General of the Dragon Martial Army, so it would be difficult for her to escape. Mrs. Euro hesitated for a moment before saying. The eunuch in red gave a cold smile, seeming to have seen through Lady Euro's intentions. He spoke in a sharp voice, the Longwu army is a royal forbidden army, and it is only a decree for her to be transferred. When Lengshuang marries His Royal Highness the Prince of Wei, it is her fortune. In the future, she will become a queen and enjoy endless wealth and honor. Mrs. Euro insisted, the destined woman still needs to bring the little girl back to discuss. The eunuch in red waved his hand and said, no need, Lingyuan has already been invited to the palace by His Highness the Prince of Wei. Madam, please wait to hold your grandson. Mrs. Euro's face changed and she even started drinking and asking, what have you done to Schwanger? It seems that Mrs. Euro's tone suddenly became tough, which made these eunuchs very dissatisfied. The eunuch in red exclaimed in a sharp voice, the King of Wei is interested in your daughter. It is a blessing that your ancestors have accumulated virtue to cultivate. Don't be shameless. Mrs. Euro's eyes were full of anxiety. I am a first-class Imperial decree lady. How dare you speak to me like this? What have you done to Schwanger? The eunuch in red laughed wildly and said, don't say you're a first-class official. Even a first-class official, my lord, has beaten you. Bitch, I think you want to be whipped. After the eunuch in red finished speaking, he swung a whip from his sleeve and was about to throw it at Lady Euro. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Takeout. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Takeout Who? The whip, accompanied by the sharp sound of the wind, swung towards Lady Euro. Mrs. Euro had no idea that the eunuch in red would be so arrogant and domineering, let alone that the eunuch in red would take action here. Madam, be careful. Suddenly, several guards rushed out from beside and pulled Lady Euro away, but the whip had already fallen on the guards. With the sound of several whips, the foreheads of several guards were immediately beaten and bleeding from the whips. A group of dog slaves, dare to stop my lord's whip. Are you planning a rebellion in the Yongping Marquis' mansion? The eunuch in red screamed loudly. Bang! At this moment, the main entrance of the hall was suddenly kicked open. Lu Yu strode in from outside the door, his face gloomy, and casually broke a wooden branch from the potted plant in the main hall. Although Lu Yu did not enter the main hall just now, his hearing was amazing and he had already heard a rough idea of what was happening in the main hall. At this moment, the eunuch in red was showing off his power and determined that the Marquis' mansion of Yongping would not dare to take action, so he became more and more rampant. Therefore, when Lu Yu bumped into the door, all these people were startled. It turns out that the little Marquis has returned. The eunuch in red turned his head and saw that it was Lu Yu. The smile on his face began to bloom again. So, it's this fool. The eunuch in red brushed the dust and sneered, it turns out that the young Marquis has returned. Congratulations to the young Marquis, he can soon become a royal relative. Lu Yu glanced at the eunuch in red and walked straight over to Lady Euro. The eunuch in red didn't expect to be ignored and was about to get angry when he suddenly realized that Lu Yu was a famous fool in Longjing and was born with incomplete intelligence, so he no longer cared about it. Also, who would a normal person compete with a fool? Mother, are you okay? Lu Yu looked at Lady Euro and saw that she was not injured. His heart gradually calmed down. Mother is fine, You go back to the backyard first. Madame Euro couldn't help feeling a pang of bitterness when she saw her son return. My son was born with incomplete intelligence, and my daughter was taken away by someone. Marquis Lu Kaishan of Yongping is not at home now. All the pressure fell on her. Mrs. Euro was about to ask Lu Yu to hurry back, but she didn't expect Lu Yu to speak up first. You guys, help Madam go back and rest. Lu Yu called in a few trembling maids. Madame Euro said anxiously, You can't intervene in this matter. Hurry up and leave now. Lu Yu smiled and said, Mother, don't worry. The child has been silent for 17 years, and now he has finally enlightened. He will no longer be as foolish as before. Mrs. Euro's eyes were wide open, looking at her son in disbelief. She was convinced that if it were Lu Yu from the past, he would never have said such things. You guys, don't help Madam go back yet. Lu Yu scolded again. Several maids were already trembling with fear from the eunuch in red, and hurriedly helped Lady Euro back to the backyard. Lu Yu glanced at the bloody guards who had been drained from the ground and said, You did a good job. Go to the butler and tell him that you will become a vassal of the Lu family from now on. Although the guard was covered in blood and very embarrassed, his eyes lit up when he heard these words. He quickly knelt down and kowtowed, Thank you, young master. My retainer is more than a little higher than his current position. Lu Yu waved his hand and said, All right, you all go and guard outside the door. No one is allowed to come in. The guards bowed and left, and the main entrance of the hall was closed, causing a sudden silence. Ha ha ha. The eunuch in red clapped his hands and laughed, saying, I have always doubted how Yongping Marquis, who was brave, could have a foolish son. It turns out that the young Marquis has been hiding his reputation and would rather carry the reputation of a fool than expose himself. A cold light suddenly flashed in the eyes of the eunuch in red. Little Marquis, what are your intentions for doing this? Realizing that the eunuch in red had a bad expression, Lu Yu paid no attention at all. Lu Yu's gaze was fixed on the eunuch in red, and finally his gaze fell on the eunuch's right hand holding a whip. He said, It's you who wants to whip my mother, right? The eunuch in red laughed and said, If someone doesn't listen, they will naturally be scolded. I hold a decree in my hand and read out your majesty's will, but your mother keeps talking incessantly, what a clamor. Noisy. Then don't use your ears. Lu Yu suddenly took action and flew the broken wooden branch out directly, rushing towards the eunuch in red. Puff. In an instant, Muji pierced through the ear of the eunuch in red, and with strong force, the ear was pulled down and nailed to the wall by Muji. Even though the strength of the wooden branches had not yet dissipated, the walls built with bricks and stones showed alarming cracks. Ah 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 ah. The eunuch in red covered his ears and screamed sadly, shouting angrily, Kill him for me. Next to the eunuch in red, there were several eunuchs in green robes. Seeing the eunuch in red being beaten, they immediately took out their weapons from their sleeves and killed Lu Yu. Behind his hands, Lu Yu seemed not to be alarmed by the scene at all. You dare to hide your weapons while waiting for the Marquis's mansion. You're not afraid. Although the eunuch in red covered his ears, blood began to seep out from his fingers, which was shocking. However, the eunuch in red laughed wildly and said, When it comes to handling affairs in the East Factory, we can do whatever we want. Even if it's a first-class duke, we can still catch him. What's a mere Marquis worth? East Factory. Lu Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he had already made a bold move. Two eunuchs in green robes were about to approach, but Lu Yu punched them left and right, slamming them into their stomachs with two loud bangs. The two eunuchs flew out horizontally and smashed heavily on the wall. My dantian has been abandoned. A green-robed eunuch's face turned pale and he screamed in agony. Lu Yu punched several more times and hit the heads of these green-robed eunuchs with one punch. Bang! 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 With each punch, blood rushed out, and then these green-robed eunuchs died one after another. The remaining eunuchs in green robes were stunned by this scene and stood still. After a while, they finally realized and ignored the eunuch in red, running towards the door one after another. Can you run away? Lu Yu waved his big hand and suddenly a golden flame appeared in his palm. Then Lu Yu bent his finger and flicked a flick, and the flames flew out and landed on several green-robed eunuchs who were preparing to escape. Ah 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 ah. These green-robed eunuchs let out a scream, and in an instant, their whole bodies were surrounded by golden flames. After 3 breaths, their bodies were devoured by the golden flames, leaving no bones alive. Several eunuchs in green robes evaporated like human beings, with no bones visible. The red eunuch's scalp tingled for a moment, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Suddenly, he shouted and rushed towards Lu Yu. He is different from other eunuchs, and there are faint purple rays emanating from him. This is a master of 7 levels the day after tomorrow. Martial practitioners need to cultivate true qi in order to advance to the postnatal realm, which consists of 1 to 9 levels. Each level of improvement is a qualitative leap. And the 7 levels of the acquired realm are already considered outstanding, and few can match them. The eunuch in red punched out, and the purple true qi carrying gusts of strong wind slammed towards the landing feather. The eunuch in red did not intend to fight against Lu Yu, his only purpose was to leave from here. The golden flame that Lu Yu just unleashed made him feel powerless to resist. People who practice martial arts generally have a much clearer perception than others. The eunuch in red had already guessed in his heart that Lu Yu had definitely encountered an adventure and possessed treasures, which gave him such skills. Escape. Get out of here. When you return to the East Factory, gather the experts and snatch Lu Yu's treasure. Thinking of this, the red-clothed eunuch's eyes even showed a hint of greed. But he didn't know that the change in his expression had already been fully observed by Lu Yu. Seeking death. A cold light flashed in Lu Yu's eyes, and suddenly a strong energy surged up and down his body. This strong energy blew his sleeves up and down, and a faint white light appeared beside Lu Yu. How could it be? It's just a layer after tomorrow. How could there be such an aura that makes me tremble with fear? The eunuch in red secretly felt startled. However, the layer after tomorrow is only 1 layer after tomorrow. He has 7 floors the day after tomorrow, and the difference between them is countless mountains and rivers. Go to hell, the eunuch in red screamed, and the purple aura on his fist couldn't help but become stronger. This fist is powerful, but in Lu Yu's eyes, it is full of flaws. Behind his hands, Lu Yu showed no signs of panic in the face of this punch. His eyes were cold, and he suddenly lifted his foot and kicked the red-clothed eunuch hard on the knee. Click. The eunuch in red was completely focused on his fist, never expecting his knee to be attacked. The force of Lu Yu's foot overlapped with the force of his forward charge. The eunuch in red let out a scream, his knee burst, and he knelt down weakly. Intense pain swept through the body, and the purple true energy that had originally surrounded the eunuch in red dissipated instantly, unable to even mobilize a trace of true energy. The whip in your hand is about to whip my mother, so don't use it. Lu Yu suddenly appeared behind the eunuch in red, without realizing it, and pulled out the dagger hidden in his sleeve. Puff. The right hand of the eunuch in red was cut off directly, and blood rushed out. Ah ah ah, my hands. The eunuch in red almost fainted from the pain. If you want to keep the other hand, answer whatever I ask. Lu Yu said coldly. At this moment, the eunuch in red had lost his original pride and nodded repeatedly like a servant. Lu Yu took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, "Who sent you to come and deliver the message?" "It's the King of Wei. He has always had a good relationship with our Lord, and this time he entrusted us to come and announce the decree, so as to put pressure on the Yongping Marquis' mansion and facilitate this marriage." The red-clothed eunuch was so painful that sweat was streaming down his forehead. "So what's going on with my sister?" It was the idea of the King of Wei. They drugged Lengshuang's food and then took advantage of Lengshuang's fainting to be forcibly taken to the royal mansion. The King of Wei said that even if the Marquis' mansion of Yongping disagrees, it will not be possible for the Marquis' mansion of Yongping to refuse until he cooks the raw rice and matures it. Noticing the strong chill behind her, the eunuch in red immediately lost his mind and shouted, "I didn't participate, I just came over to announce the decree, it has nothing to do with me. If you dare to hold a whip towards my mother, you'll be dead." Lu Yu said in a deep voice. The eunuch in red panicked to the extreme and said in a sharp voice, "You can't kill me. My adoptive father is Lu Gonggang, the leader of the East Factory." Puff. Lu Yu stabbed the red-clothed eunuch in the head with a knife, and the eunuch's words came to an abrupt end. The body fell weakly to the ground. Lu Yu suddenly noticed something and took his hand away from the dagger. "Step aside, I'm going to see Yuer." Mrs. Yuro's voice rang outside the door. The guard said bitterly, "Madam, the young master said that no one is allowed to enter. It's better for you not to enter." Squeak. The door was opened and Lu Yu walked out from inside. "Mother, it's already okay," Lu Yu smiled. Mrs. Yuro glanced at Lu Yu and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that her son was fine. "But when I saw the corpses of several eunuchs lying in the spacious main hall, and there were still blood stains on the walls, my face suddenly changed." "You child, do you know you've caused a big trouble?" Mrs. Yuro said anxiously. With a smile on his face, Lu Yu said to Lady Yuro, "Mother, don't worry, everything will be carried by a child and nothing will happen." After speaking, Lu Yu glanced at the guards with his eyes and said, "Clean up the main hall quickly, and send someone to guard the surroundings of the Marquis' mansion. Whoever dares to break in will be killed." The guard was startled and quickly responded loudly. "Prepare a fast horse for me." Lu Yu instructed again. Mrs. Yuro was shocked and said, "Yuer, what are you going to do?" "Don't worry, mother. I'll go pick up sister and come back." Lu Yu strode towards the mansion door. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Riot the Wei Prince's Mansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 5. I want to go now, it's too late. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 6. Identity Recognition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 7. Imperial Palace Worship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 8. Mang Fu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 9. Killing Innocence. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 10. Lengshuang's Awakening. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors.